Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut and sew a stylish bustier blouse with a flare sleeve. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up. So let's dive right into today's video. So first I'm going to start off with my pattern, and I've gone ahead to mark out all the basic measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waist. And for my blouse length I'm using the full pattern paper, which is about 24.5 inches. But when I'm sewing this, I'll be adding extra 1 inch to it to make my dress longer. So I'll go ahead and mark my shoulder divided by 2, and I'll come down by 1 inch. So after that, I'll go ahead and mark a basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches, which will serve as a guide for this pattern. So I'll be drawing this out very light because I'm also going to adjust it later. So I'll go ahead and I will draw my shoulder slope. So after that, I went ahead to mark out my chest line. So when I was recording, I didn't know that my phone stopped recording. So I went ahead to find my chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. I divided it into 2 and marked my bust circumference. To get a clear explanation, you can go ahead and check my previous videos. So I'll go ahead and I will mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is your bust span also divided by 2. So I'll go ahead and I'll draw out a straight line, and also go ahead to extend the dart lines down to the top length of my pattern, and I'll go ahead to place my ruler and I will connect it. Now you want to go ahead and draw a basic dart of 1/2 inch on both sides and come down by 1 inch from your bust point. Go ahead to connect from your waist down to that point on top. After you're done connecting, you're also going to connect to the lower part this way. So this is what I have, and now I'm going to be inserting my basic measurement, which is my bust circumference divided by 4. My bust is 33 divided by 4. I have 8.3, and I'll be adding 1.5 inches sewing allowance. At the under bust, my under bust circumference is 28 divided by 4. I have 7. Measure the dart intake, replace, and I'll be adding 1.5 inches. So my waistline is the same as my under bust. I'll just go ahead to mark the dart intake, replace it, and add my sewing allowance. At the top length, you want to go ahead and mark your hip circumference divided by 4, and then I'll add about 1/2 inch before I'll go ahead and add 1.5 inches for my sewing allowance. So you can decide to cut the lower part of this pattern as a flare, or you can just go ahead and connect it this way. So when I'm actually sewing, I'll be adding more flare effect at the lower part. So I'm just going to go ahead to use my curved rule to connect from the bust down to the under bust to the waistline and down to the top length this way. So after that, I will just go ahead to outline my waist, because that will be very important when we are drafting out this pattern. So now I'm just going to go ahead to cut the rest of my pattern, and I'm going to mark the dart intake I have on this side also on the other side of my pattern. So here is my pattern. I'm done marking out the dart on the other side, also on this part, just like we did when we were marking it out. So if you notice, when I was cutting, I notched the neckline of my pattern. That is the 3 inches neckline. So from that point, I'll extend it by 1/2 inch. So that means my neckline is 3.5 inches now. So from that point, I'll go down by 5.5 inches. You can use 6 inches also. So from the new 1/2 inch I marked from the neckline, I'm going to extend it down to that point. That is the 5.5 inches point. And from this part, I'll just draw out my neckline, which is not so roundish, and I'll now connect it to that 5.5 inches this way. So I'll go ahead to draw out the neckline and also indicate the point for the button on the pattern. Now we'll be working on the lower part. So from here, I will be marking about 2 inches, and from this part of my pattern, I'm going to connect it. That is from the dart line, because we're going to close up the dart when we are sewing that point also. And from this other side, I'll come down by 5 inches from my waistline, and I'll connect it all the way to that 2 inches that I marked at the other side. So after I'm done connecting on this point, at this point, I'm also going to work on the other side of the pattern. So from here, I'm just going to come down by 5.5 inches and I will connect this part. And from here, I'll come down by 5 inches and I'll go ahead to also connect it. So remember, I said I'll be extending my pattern at the lower side with 1 inch or ½ inch because I feel is a bit shorter than what I want. So after this, we're done altering this pattern for the front pattern. Or if you don't want to cut the lower part this way, you can just end up stopping at the waistline and you will cut the lower part as a flare. So I'm just going to cut this out and we'll go ahead to cut out the back pattern, and we will be closing up the dart for this pattern also. So just like we have that on this side, you're going to also blend out the darts that you have on this part, because you're going to also close the dart on the main part of the dress, that's the upper part of the dress. So for this part at the lower part, I'll be adding about 1 inch or create more flare effect when I'm cutting it out. So I'll just go ahead and cut the rest of the pattern. So after I'm done cutting, this is what I have. So we'll be moving on to cut the back pattern of this dress. So here is the back pattern. I've gone ahead to cut it out just like we did for the front pattern. The only difference is that this pattern has a zipper allowance, and for the neckline for the back, I used 3 by 1 inch. And now we're going to start placing our measurements starting from the zipper allowance in front. So I'll be marking my nipple to nipple or my bust span divided by 2, which I'm going to go ahead to connect, drawing a straight line. So after I'm done connecting, drawing a straight line, the next thing I want to do is to go ahead to mark my dart intake of ½ inch on both sides. We are using a basic dart for this pattern. Come down by 1 inch from my bust point, and I'm going to connect my dart from my waist to the upper part, and from this point I'm just going to measure about 4 inches down, and I'm going to be connecting to my waistline also, and I will repeat this at the other side. So after I'm done doing this, I'll be inserting my measurement, and to insert my measurement, it's going to start from the zip. I'll mark the bust circumference divided by 4 and I'll add my sewing allowance. And after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, and I'll add my sewing allowance. At the waist, I'll mark the waist circumference divided by 4, and I will measure my dart intake, and I'll add my sewing allowance. So at the top length, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4. And I'll add my sewing allowance and also add ½ inch. I have about ½ inch remaining at the lower part, which will also serve as the ½ inch I added at the front pattern. So I'll just go ahead and I will reconnect all my pattern, and this is what I have after I'm done connecting. So the next step I'm going to take is to come in by ½ inch from my waistline, and from there I'm going to place my curved rule, extend it all the way down, and then place, and I will connect it upwards this way. So this is to get rid of the bulginess at the back of the dress when you're putting on the dress. So you have to also outline your waistline at the back because it's very important, starting from the zip, because you're going to also join it separately. Now I'm just going to go ahead to use my scissors to cut this out. So if you have any question regarding this particular tutorial, please don't forget to leave the question at the comment section. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. So now to cut out my sleeve, you're going to measure your armhole round, and whatever you have, divide it by 2, and you'll be adding a sewing allowance to it. So I'll be coming down by ½ inch on top So this is to mark my starting point for this pattern, or to have about ½ inch, which will also serve as my joining allowance. So here is an old pattern that I have for a basic sleeve, and that is what I'll be using for this tutorial. So first, I'm going to mark my sleeve cap height, which is your bust circumference divided by 12 plus 0.5. For me is 3.25, but I like using 3.5 inches. So after doing that, I'll place my tape and mark my shoulder to elbow point. My shoulder to elbow point is about 13 inches, and I'm going to go ahead to mark. Now the lower part is the total length of my sleeve, which is about 21 or 22 inches. So now you want to go ahead to just place your tape and measure what you have at the armhole of your dress, and you're going to place it on that part. So after measuring mine, I have about 9 inches. If you follow the same pattern most times, you're just going to have almost the same thing. So I'll just add ½ inch to it just in case I have shortage. So after that, I'll mark my round elbow circumference, which is about 13 inches divided by 2. I'll mark and add my sewing allowance. So at the lower part, I'll mark round my sleeve, and which is about 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5, and I'll add ½ inch. So from that point, I'll just go ahead to connect to the upper part of my pattern. So this is what I have for my basic sleeve, but I'm just going to readjust the upper part a bit because it's looking a bit bigger than what I'm supposed to have. So this is it, and I'm going to cut this out. So for the flare part, I will be cutting it while I'm sewing my dress. So after this, I'll be marking about ½ inch on top, which will be serving as a joining allowance to my dress. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and also join us on the sewing tutorial. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please click on the subscribe button. Thanks.